this has taught me that I've made way too many assumptions about this. Welcome back to the channel, guys. You know when you've got a very strong held belief about a product and you think it's the best thing since sliced bread and nothing can touch it, basically? I've always had that about the iPad. So if you've watched my previous iPad videos, I've probably said at some point that if you want to buy a tablet, either your first ever tablet or a new tablet, just get the iPad, because it's not even worth looking at the competition. I've genuinely believed that in the past, but the reason for that is that I've not put enough effort into trying the competition. Let's be completely honest here. Now I'm changing. I'm putting effort into checking out the competition, and I've realized since I've started using this Samsung Galaxy Tab, no, let me get this right, the Galaxy Tab S10 FE. I wish it had a shorter name. Regardless of that, since I started using this tablet, I've realized that that was a very short-sighted viewpoint from me. And actually, if you move away from the iPad, and if you really question, this is the important point, if you really question the way that you use tablets, as I have done over the last couple of weeks, you realize that you're not quite as tied to Apple as you thought you were. And then you realize that the competition is actually really good. Like, really good. And in this video, I'm going to challenge 5 preconceptions that I have about the iPad and its competition. Trust me, I've surprised myself. Right, let's very quickly go through the main specs of the Galaxy. I'll just call it the Tab S10 FE for now, because that's easier. I won't go through all the specs because I don't do that anymore, because you can just find them on the internet. But the key thing is the fact that, firstly, Samsung doesn't list the chip. They don't publicly state which chip is in this tablet. But if you do some Googling, you can find out that it's the Samsung Exynos 1580. So no MediaTek Dimensity like you get in the more expensive S10 Plus and S10 Ultra. This is Samsung's own chip. There's a few options in terms of storage and RAM, which we'll put down here, which affects the pricing, which again we'll put down here. It's got a 90 Hz display. It's got an 8,000 milliamp hour battery, which can apparently last up to 20 hours. 13 megapixel rear. I'm reading out the specs, aren't I? The specs, we'll put the main specs down here. That's the main thing. The one thing it does have, which is really interesting as an iPad aficionado, is IP68 water resistance, which is really nice. It's that thing that's always been missing from an iPad. It basically adds another layer of protection and just reassurance and just durability that you don't get from this. You also get the S Pen as standard. You don't have to buy this separately, and at the time of filming, if you order it today, you also get the keyboard cover as well, so you don't have to spend extra on that, although even that isn't that expensive. It's it's about 139, 169 pounds, depending on which size you go for, because there's 2 sizes of this. But again, compared to the Magic Keyboard, which is 269/299 depending on which one you go for, this is already a very affordable tablet compared to the iPad. I'm comparing this to the iPad Air because it's the most obvious comparison. But on to my 5 preconceptions about iPads and the competition. Preconception number 1 is the fact that nothing is as well built as an iPad. That is rubbish, I'm afraid, because the Tab S10 FE is really well built. This feels very much like a premium flagship tablet. It's as well built as any iPad I've ever held, and it's incredibly thin. I think it's just a tiny bit thinner than the iPad Air. It's not as thin, I don't think, as the iPad Pro, the M4 version, but that is ridiculously thin, and this is just perfect. Everything about it is just the perfect size. The only thing that threw me a little bit is the 16:10 aspect ratio, which does make it feel a little bit odd occasionally to use in portrait format. It tends to promote using it as a widescreen tablet, which is fine. It makes sense for content consumption and that sort of stuff. As an iPad user, that has kind of thrown me a little bit, because iPads are 4:3 in terms of their aspect ratio. So if you're used to an iPad, coming to this might feel a little bit strange to begin with, but you do get used to it. The other thing that kind of threw me occasionally was the placement of the power button. Normally on the iPad it's up here, so again, that's just iPad stuff. It's iPad user things, which isn't a slight at Samsung at all. But yeah, in terms of the build quality, fantastic. The display, okay, well, there's only one thing to mention here really, which is the fact that it has a 90 Hz variable refresh rate, and the iPad, unless you go for the Pro, doesn't. That has a 60 Hz display. So if you go for the iPad Air, for instance, which is more expensive than this, it has a slower display, and it does make a difference, because most smartphones these days, apart from the iPhone 16, Okay, the Pro and Pro Max have it, but the 16 doesn't. But every other smartphone I've tested recently has a high refresh rate display, so it matters, I'm afraid, and I can't keep defending Apple for not putting ProMotion into all of their iPads. When it comes to speakers, the iPad is just a gnat's nink better, just slightly. The iPad speakers, and in fact Apple speakers in general, are just a bit richer, a bit fuller, but these aren't bad. The speakers in the Tab S10 FE are very, very good actually. Very bright, very loud. They just don't have the depth that you get from an iPad. But that is the way it is, I'm afraid. Apple has the march on audio. Preconception number 2 is that iPadOS is the best operating system for tablets ever. No, it's not. And in fact, the more that I use One UI 7 on this Samsung tablet, the more I realise it's very similar, in fact, almost identical in terms of how it feels to use as iPadOS 18. And the reason for that is my use case. So I watch things on my tablet, I reference stuff, I do a bit of web browsing. Occasionally, I'll do a bit of work, email, writing, that kind of thing. And when that is your use case, these two operating systems feel identical. Basically, the iPad isn't any better. And if anything, the Tab S10 FE feels quicker because it has that 90Hz display. Preconception number 3 is that the Apple ecosystem is keeping me welded to the iPad. No, it's not actually. When I sat down to map out this video, I was thinking for ages about what it is about the Apple ecosystem that is making me use the iPad, that means that I can't use any other kind of tablet. And I came up with nothing, literally nothing at all. Occasionally, I transfer things from the iPhone to the iPad and vice versa, but that's very rare, actually. Normally, it's from this to the Mac and vice versa, but I don't really do any kind of interoperability. I don't do any kind of connectivity between the iPad and my other Apple devices. Okay, Apple Music, although I've stopped using Apple Music, haven't I? I'm using YouTube Music now. What else is there? Apple TV? No, I watched that on my Apple TV. Honestly, when I really thought about it, I realised that the iPad is the one Apple product that isn't completely welded to me because of the Apple ecosystem. And that was a massive realization because it means I can just switch to this. And actually, I can still transfer things from the S25 Ultra to this very quickly. QuickShare is identical to AirDrop in terms of reliability and speed, so that's fine. The only reason I'm not switching to this is because this is a review unit and it has to go back to Samsung, and I don't need to buy another tablet when I've got 87,000 iPads, but if I wanted to, I could. Preconception number 4 is that the Apple Pencil Pro is the best stylus on the market. There is an argument for that, but it's very expensive. And if you compare it against the S Pen comes for free with the S10 FE, and if you need to buy a new one, it's only 46 quid versus 129 quid. The only differences really are the fact that on the Apple Pencil Pro, you get the tilt functionality, and you also get that barrel roll thing where you can, barrel roll thing where you basically twist it in your finger and the highlighter turns on the page. It's whatever. If you don't need that sort of stuff, this still has pressure sensitivity. It still attaches itself to the tablet. It's thin, it's light. It's also shorter than the Apple Pencil Pro, which I think makes it more ergonomic. Then preconception number 5 is the big one for me, and it's this belief that I've had to recommend the iPad over anything else when it comes to tablets. That just isn't the case. The Samsung Galaxy Tab S10 FE has proven that I was wrong. If your tablet use case is like mine, so you watch stuff, you read stuff, you listen to stuff, you occasionally do very light work on it, you don't necessarily need an iPad. And in fact, you could save money here. And yes, I'm sure in benchmarking terms, the iPad Air would beat the S10 FE because it has a better chip than the Exynos that's in here, but that doesn't matter unless you do very intense gaming and intense work on your tablet, which I don't think many people do. And no, I'm not switching. I can see all the comments already. I'm not switching because, as mentioned earlier, I have lots of iPads. I have no reason to buy another tablet. But if you do, you should consider the S10 FE. Let me know what you think in the comments, guys, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you know where that button is.